Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for popping on this. My name is Shane Kofit, and I am the community manager here at Strides. And something that comes up really frequently in our strategy calls is basically people wanting to know what the app development process looks like. And I know for me, I'm not a coder myself, and so when I think of people coding apps or our developers doing certain things or tweaking features or fixing stuff, it's hard for me to even imagine what kind of work they're doing. And I think that if it's hard to imagine what the work is, it's hard to manage it, and it's hard to in a lot of cases feel great about paying a team to go do a bunch of work that you don't even know what it looks like or how to have oversight on it, or what good work looks like or bad work looks like. So I've invited Austin Betzer here. Austin is not only the founder of Stride, but he's our lead developer. So what I love about working with Austin is he's not only a great leader and great at managing the different people that we have in all of our different development teams, but he actually gets his hands dirty too. So and I think Austin, I'll kind of let you speak for yourself, but I think you kind of pride yourself on that of being like you're more of like a player coach rather than a boss of, hey, here's all the projects, get everything done by Friday, right? I love that you can actually like get in the weeds with it. um and so that's our goal here is we want to basically take you on a journey and a walkthrough of what the process looks like from start to finish, and hopefully give you some insight into what the process looks like for you and your app, so that when you get on a strategy call with us or you're ready to turn your idea into an app, you can see the different stages that we're going to take you through and feel excited about it. Anything you want to add to that, Austin, before we jump in?
No, Shane, I think you covered it. I loved the intro. Um, but yeah, I mean, just to kind of reiterate, I think the big goal here is to, get you guys more involved and to explain to you guys what it really looks like under the hood. That way, when it comes to working with a developer or with a team, you are not necessarily, an expert in all the jargon, but you should be able to, be helpful or bring value into a lot of the technical meetings.
Yeah, and let me ask you that actually as a great place to start, because one of the things when you first told me about Strides and you got me excited about it, I know you said that, hey, I want to help people that have a brilliant idea but don't have the technical team, right? And so we come into companies a lot of times and we act as that team. But what's the right level of like management oversight, right? Like when somebody comes to us with our idea, in your eyes, who is the most ideal client? Like what kind of things are they really good at? Is it okay that they're not, do they need to have any technical skill at all, or what's the right
Yeah.
balance there?
So that's a great question, Shane. Honestly, I am very opinionated about this. If you are a technical person, 9 out of 10 times, I probably will not want to work with you. And the reason why is because you have experience in it, you're going to have a really strong opinion. And I don't pay you to give you your for you to give you your opinions. So instead, what we do is we've got a very unique or strict process, and the way that works is somebody who is not technical at all, and usually it's the flip side. It's somebody who's super good at sales, super good at marketing, super good
Mhm.
at building a brand, somebody who basically the entrepreneur, the CEO. Those are the ideal people we like to work with, and that's because they don't care how something's built or how it works. They just care that it works well, right? And they're not always breathing down our neck. They don't have a preferred development stack. And we at Strides really like that. It allows us to build way more efficient processes. We have a lot more reusable code across projects. And I think at the end of the day, everybody's happy with that.
And then how do you tell, like, can you tell pretty fast when you talk to somebody and they say, yeah, my idea is for this social networking app and I plan to have, 50 million users by the end of year one. And if we can just capture, 1% of this gigantic market, we're all going to be, you know what I mean? Like, because there's kind of a fine line, and I've seen you look at different deals and you're like, oh man, these guys really know what they're talking about. And then there's other people that come in and you go, I don't know if they really know their stuff, so what's the fine line there, right? Like, you want somebody to come in and have a big vision, but you want them to be realistic. And what are a couple of the things that you're looking for in some of those first calls that we take on with founders?
Yeah, honestly, I want to say like our most favorite clients, they're usually the ones that come in literally with a list of features or ideas just on like a piece of pen and paper. They might have gone a little step farther and like typed it up,
Yeah.
um, versus the other side are the people who are like, okay, we can see that 30% of users on the App Store believe in, self-help apps. I think we can come in and solve this specific problem. And usually when you're one person who's coming in at that angle, it's hard for me to fully buy in, just because it's just something about that approach. You're thinking more of the amount of money you could be making versus like really caring about the problem or a specific problem that you're trying to solve. So hopefully that answers that question a little
Yeah,
bit.
so that's actually a good point because I've seen that too. It's like the people that come in and say it's that whole example of, hey, we're going after this industry. There's X amount, 400 million people in the world that have this problem. If we can get 2%, and you can almost like see them doing the calculations in their head versus the people that come in and they have something really interesting to solve and something they want to do that's helpful, right?
Yeah, like I feel like I show way more interest with somebody that's like, dude, this is the problem. I don't know, specifically like self-help is just so big right now, especially with COVID and everything going on.
Yeah.
They're usually like, man, like I'm really struggling with meditations and calms, super advanced. You can do all of these fancy things, but really just like the one thing I want to do is sit down and meditate for 5 minutes. And I'm really just not sure how to solve that problem. I'm way more excited about that person that's like, dude, calm, is terrible, or I struggle with this. I want to build this app and charge $5.99 a month. Usually the people who talk numbers, demographics, those kind of things first, versus the problem. One's, in my opinion, is way better to work with. So
That's cool. That's a good difference. And I guess before we get too far too, like why I know a lot of people always wonder, they'll come talk to us and they'll say, hey, I have this idea, but I'm not sure if it's the right time to do it. It's been kicking around for a few years and maybe now's the right time, maybe it's not. So can you just kind of give us a few reasons of like, why would you tell people that right now is a good time, because I think we see this a lot, right? Like you look at all the different things on the App Store and you might think like, oh, you see one stat about, there's almost 600 million apps downloaded a day, at one point in 2020 or something like that. And it's like, oh, are there so many apps that my app is going to get lost? Or, so it almost feels like I could see a lot of people waiting for a long time saying, oh, when this space is bigger, then I'll launch my idea. And then the space gets gets a lot bigger. And then they go, oh, maybe it's too big. I'm going to, how am I going to be able to stand out? So, but I've always seen you take an approach of just like, hey, right now is the right time. Here's why. So maybe just, can you break down a few stats or a few reasons? What are you seeing that helps somebody feel like right now is the perfect time to start building their app idea?
yeah, so that's like a really good question. And I think the biggest thing to understand is literally everyone has a smartphone. So because everybody has a smartphone, there's so much opportunity for you to go in and break into the market or get a lot of people onto it. But I think more than that is, if you look back on 2020, you'll notice that COVID changed a lot of things for a lot of businesses. So Crumble is a big cookie company, and one of the big things that they did in 2020 was basically like a self order and checkout. So now I don't even have to interact with the person. I just go up, click an iPad, click a couple buttons, and they hand me a box of cookies. And it's easier for the people making the cookies. It's easier for me, and there's just so much convenience around mobile applications. And we've seen in 2020 all the new innovations that have happened specifically for apps, and it's crazy. Like everybody needs to break into the mobile space.
Yeah. Yeah, that is wild. I think now more than ever, people are they're used to spending money online. I'm seeing like my mom who's, Ubering and, door dashing and things like
Yeah,
that. A year ago, you would not have seen that.
yeah, seriously, it's so crazy. 2020 was, I don't know, good for some and crazy for others.
Yeah,
So,
that's wild. And what kind of businesses will really benefit from having a mobile app? So maybe before we jump in and we start talking kind of features and things like that, um, what are some of the attributes behind the business that will help them really benefit from having an app?
yeah, so it's hard to narrow it down to a specific business or specialty. I mean, like it's not super easy to say that one business would, you know, get more value than another business. But what you have to look at is the value you're bringing to the customers, right? So somebody who owns a business that interacts with a customer, or a customer interacts with you, maybe once or twice, you probably wouldn't look into a mobile app. But if you're able to solve a problem, once a week, once a day, a couple times a day, those are businesses that need to have a mobile app. It's just going to be so much easier for customers. And I think the example that I use all the time is probably like shopping at Costco. I love to walk around and shop at Costco, but for a lot of people, they use their mobile app. I'm not necessarily the right customer, but I have friends who get on the Costco app every single day and they're looking for sales, right? So as long as majority of the people are using your product or service multiple times, a week, a month, it's definitely worth considering going mobile and building an application.
So, okay, yeah, super cool, Austin. So so now we're going to take people through the actual steps that we use to turn an app into an idea, right? So we're going to take people through, if you're watching, we're going to take you through the 9 steps that we have outlined, which is creating your feature list, getting your tech recommendations, building wireframes, coming up with milestones, building a clickable prototype, our internal stand-ups, the actual process of coding, the process of testing and quality assurance, and then submission to the App Store. So as we jump into those 9 steps, let's actually start with a feature list. So Austin, first off, what is a feature list and why is it important why do you want to get all that down in one place?
So, a feature list is probably like the most important piece of any application, because it's going to build a roadmap of your entire product. So basically what we do is my team, your team, we get together and we just brainstorm, and we just literally come up, and no idea is a dumb idea. We literally just start throwing stuff out. We write it down, and we basically make this big board of different things that we can add and hopefully bring value to the user. Now we take that feature list, and what we do is we break it down into an MVP. And basically what an MVP is the least amount of features that we can put into an application, but still bring a lot of value to the consumer. And we start with the bare minimum. And the reason why is, going back to that the original feature list, we are making a lot of assumptions early. And what we want to do is we want to try and make the least amount of assumptions possible and get the product into the user's hands. That way they can give feedback and you can start giving the consumers what they want versus what you think they need. So that defines basically a feature list.
And then how do you prioritize this list of, so we have our list of dream features. What's your typical process for prioritizing those into like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4? And how do you know what's going to be the most important?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And somebody once told me that when you're building an application, you don't look at the product as a whole. You look at the product as a tiny little piece. So this is where I think our process is a little bit unique. And I actually had this conversation today, is when we're building your product, we're not thinking about just the whole product all the time. What we're thinking about is what your application needs to go live. So we actually build a little bit backwards. So for example, a lot of companies might start with, sign in, forgot password, onboarding. We actually don't start with that. Let's say we're building like a food delivery service. We're only building things related to delivery. So we will start at the core portion of the application. That way, if the time comes, we can just throw it on the App Store versus having, half an application. So we make sure we put all of our attention on the most core portion of your app, because this is what's going to separate you from everyone else. And the sooner that we can get that tested and start getting feedback on, the quicker you're going to start seeing that adoption by users.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's always really exciting for our clients too. I think that's one thing that's different about us is I've seen people comment over and over like, wow, I can't believe how fast it went from like idea to seeing my actual feature live and in my hand. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And then the second step that we take people through is the tech recommendation. So what is the typical, and I know this is hard to answer because there's a lot of different apps out there, but what's like a typical tech stack behind an app? Like what are some of the features that as an app founder that you would pay for and you would need to subscribe to and that you would need in order for your app to actually
So there's a lot of things to ask yourself, and it's largely going to depend on the team. Um, Somebody once told me this when working on. I was asking some questions about scaling. And I was like, hey, what languages should we use or what should we do? And he was like, dude, you're looking at this like all wrong. What you actually need to be asking is, what are your developers most familiar with? And that's what you should use. Always start with what people are most familiar with and then build from there. And if you do it that way, typically you'll at least start with an okay project. Maybe it's not the best, maybe something old was used, but at least you're able to build it efficiently and get it to market. Don't go make a developer learn a whole new stack, a whole new language. It's going to take 3 times as long, and you're banking that the consumers are still going to want what you're offering versus having it done in 6 weeks in something that might be a complete jumble. They're at least able to give you feedback, and you can go rebuild it later once you have customers.
And what's the main language that we use at Strides when we're deploying apps?
Um,
And maybe talk a little bit about native apps versus I've
yeah,
seen a lot of stuff floating around about hey, you can code your app without any or you can launch your app without any code, and some of these code list options.
yeah.
What are the typical languages that we use, and what's the difference between a native app and one built on a platform?
Yeah, so basically what we do at Strides is we do all the mobile stuff natively. So on Android, we're using Kotlin and Java, and then on iOS, we're using Swift and Objective-C. Um, and on the web, most of our web development's done in React. For landing page type stuff, we'll go use like a no-code tool like Webflow. But really what I think you're looking for here is the backend tools. How are we actually putting everything together? And it largely just depends, right? So in our case, one of the biggest projects we built was for a delivery service. And using a tool like Firebase, which can be designed to scale. But in my experience, you'll soon fade out of it anyway, depending on what you're trying to do and the relationships you need. We use AWS. AWS is just great for server management and all things related to backend development and photo savings and storage or whatever. But yeah, I would say the stack that we most commonly use, or the languages or the tools, would be for web development, it's React. For, like I said, for iOS, it's native to Swift, and then Android, it's Kotlin. And then honestly, all the stuff in between, you're not going to remember anyways. So
Cool. All right. And then after we get the tech recommendations down, then we move into the wireframe stage. So we're building wireframes, we're setting milestones. So what is a wireframe? And maybe actually show us, Austin, can you show us like those flow charts where we were, kind of mapping out the different features, and what's the point of this stage? And then how does this impact what we're actually working on and what we're building?
yeah, so let me pull this up super quickly here. So if I share my screen, you'll be able to see this here. So
Yeah.
basically what this is we built this massive, massive delivery app, and a wireframe, or you know, high design fidelity user flow concept here, is basically the route that the user is going to take, or the steps that, or the journey that a user can go through, and all the things in between. So we basically walk through this. So in this case, it would be setting up a restaurant. So here, this is just super simple. And we're thinking in the terms of like the new user, the person just coming in. How we even thought a step back about how are we going to get those users to the platform? How are we going to raise awareness? Anyways, you've got an ad or whatever else. They get a special link, and we email them over info to get started or to build their restaurant's account. Once they enter their information, they just get navigated to the display info, business info, different things. Once they've set up all of this information here, they're then going to start going to create their actual restaurant. What are their menu items? When are we open? What what different things are there that you offer? Once they go through and set all this up, there's this approval and rejection phase. And you'll notice that we're getting like super granular here. And that's because we really want both the you guys as the client, but also the developers to understand exactly what they're building. The less thinking you can take out of a developer's job, um, ideally the better, at least the cheaper for you. Anyways, so once it goes through and gets approved, the restaurant goes live and we're good to go. If there's an issue, we send them an email, tell them what the issue is, and then they're expected to fix it. And then
Yeah, so this is a pretty big, I mean, this is a pretty big part of it, because basically if, if you get too far down the road and we've already designed and developed an entire feature set, and then it's like, oh, we need, we need a flow chart for something that happens if if their submission gets rejected, and we have to build it in after the fact. It's a lot more difficult to add in
yeah,
way after the fact, right?
yeah, having to go back, it's way easier to. So it's a lot like building a house. Um, what happens is with code, anyways, or at least a lot of the times what happens is this right here is your foundation, right? This basically defines how your entire application works. If this flow is your foundation for signing up and you change it, you're not just moving a piece of the foundation somewhere else, you're destroying the entire thing and putting it back together. Um, that's an extreme analogy, but a lot of what it feels like to actually develop an application.
No, it makes sense, right? I mean, if you build a foundation for a house that, for a room that is 20 square feet by 20, by 20 square feet, and then you go, oh, by the way, it actually needs to be 40, that's, you're not just putting the same house on the same, or the bigger house on the same size foundation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's super important to spend, obviously there's that balance, but you should spend a good amount of time thinking through all of the different features and flows and states that it can go through. That way, the designer, when they're looking at this too, they're thinking, "Hey, we need to have this dialogue in case something goes wrong. We need to have these messages." And what it does is it creates a lot less questions during development. And instead, we're able to just kind of churn through and get things built out versus trying to figure out what we were thinking 3 months ago. So,
Yeah, I like that. That's cool. And then how does this process? So this is like the wireframing and flowchart, that phase. And then how do you actually break this into milestones, and how do you start? Where do you take this? How does this actually start to become a real idea now?
yeah. So, I mean, you basically nailed it on the head. What we're going to do is we're going to build out these milestones. And I kind of talked about how I build these milestones a little bit earlier. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the very core functionality of your app, like the reason that we're going to start by solving the problem that we initially intended on solving first. And once we solve that problem, we'll start to go on and add extra things, push notifications, payments, everything else. But we want to make sure we really dial in solving that problem and put all of our energy there. Um, and the way that we do that is we build out milestones, or basically weekly sprints, which turn into milestones after so long. And that's how we start. So I can actually show you a project that we were working on currently. And this is the Android version of flip flops. And basically, what we've got is this Kanban board of things that need to be built out this week, things that are on schedule to be built next week, things that are currently being built. So basically, you have this Kanban board that explains what's going on this week, what people are currently working on, and what's been done. And then obviously we have what's going to be built out next week as well. And so we typically go about a week. We'll build out a week or two of tasks that will break apart. And the reason we don't go past that is because something could change. And it's a waste of everybody's time to overplan. So I try not to get too far ahead of everybody else. Because I've been in the position where I get on the call and they're like, we're actually scrapping this whole feature. And I'm like, well, okay. So anyways, we try to make sure that we've got everything organized for the developers. So it makes sense.
Cool. So we've gone through the feature list. We have our tech recommendations mapped out. We've gone through flowcharts and we built our feature list. We've broken things into milestones, and then walk us through the next step of the process. Because I know we don't go right into code. What does it look like? What role do we take in design? So walk us through how the clickable prototype works, because I love that phase of the process, and I've seen a lot of steps being solved and problems being solved in that clickable prototype phase. So what is a clickable prototype, first of all, and how does that work, and what have you seen that solve? What does that help us do?
So the big reason for a clickable prototype is to basically what it does is it allows us to visualize and go through the flow of the user and then start to iterate on that. So you'll find in the wireframes that there might be some redundancies of having to collect information or having to take 2 or 3 steps. And what building a prototype does is it allows you as the client to see where we at Strides are building for you, but it allows us to also refine processes. So something that might have taken a user 3 steps, we turn it into 1. Or I think probably the most important part is we start to get feedback. So again, the worst thing you can do as a development company or a tech company is to make assumptions. And so instead, what you do is you can take this prototype and actually show it to consumers and start getting feedback. So this also kind of segues into the next part, kind of like testing. But to hit it just super quickly is I would ask a user to say, hey, go to your profile and change your phone number. And if they can't figure out how to do that, or a majority of the users struggle with that, then we're actually going to refine that process. And what this also does is long term, it saves everyone a lot of time, because if we can go through in the design phase, it takes way less time to change it in the design than it will in development. So we want to make sure we do as much testing and as much validation as we can in the design and in this prototype here before we get to development. So a clickable prototype is just like it sounds. I can go through, I can find my profile, I can add different payments, I can do different things and click through it. I can,
Cool. And clients actually get this. They can actually get this on their phone. Yeah. They can play around with it. They can give it almost a test drive and see how the features are working. And there's no code done on the app at this point, correct?
Yep, exactly. I'll actually at the very beginning, we always ask our clients, what kind of phone do you have? That way we design it to the exact size of their phone so they can get a real experience. So basically what I can actually do, Figma is super cool. I can actually take this and screen share it to my phone, and I can like walk through it on my phone and go through different things and leave comments and give feedback. And we send all of our clients a link, and we expect all of them to go through each individual screen and to add comments. We want to know what you think. And then the next week we iterate, we show you different things.
So cool. Yeah, this is one of my favorite parts of the entire process. I think that's cool. And then, okay, now we have we built our feature list, we have our tech platform, we've built wireframes, we have a flowchart, we have a clickable prototype. Now, what does it actually look like to go from clickable prototype to, where we're actually ready to test it and, put some code down? So what does the code look like on the back end? I'm always interested in that part of the process.
Yeah, see, it's always interesting. As soon as you look at code, you realize that it's not as fun as you expect it to be. So I've got some code that I'll show you, and it's always fun. People always ask me, if you could show anybody, code, what would you show them? And I'm like, honestly, I show them the most boring part of the app, and it's always the onboarding because it's so pretty, or like a subscription page or a landing page, just because everything else is just so complicated.
Yeah.
Try and explain. And so I've got this here. This is an app I worked on or our team worked on, called the Daily Shifts. And basically, to briefly tell you what it is it's this mindfulness app. It makes you check in, multiple times a day. And this right here is just the subscription page. And you'll see the stuff on the left is it's called a storyboard. And basically it's, think of any website builder tool, kind of like Webflow or WordPress or Shopify, where you can kind of drag and drop specific things in. And I know you might be thinking, why am I paying you to drag and drop stuff in? It's not quite that simple. So we've got this stuff on the right, which is the actual code. So I won't walk you through any of this, but for example, gradients suck and are very time consuming. But this is a gradient that we add. Lots of code here. Anyways, this is also terms and conditions. You think it would be super easy to just embed a link into something and change the color, but it's not. This is literally how much code is this? I don't know, 20, 30 lines of code from 121 to from 87 to 121. Just all this code to say, make this text blue, and if they click on it, take them to our terms and conditions.
So all of this on the right, how many lines of code is all this?
So to manage just this page right here, we've got a little under 200 lines of code.
Wow, and that's one page. Yep. One page in the onboarding process. We haven't even made it into the app yet.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. And not to mention this one, it's one page of code here, but you'll also see these little things which actually point to a different file. And so to even get to this point, you've probably written hundreds of thousands of lines of code to make this even 200 lines of code. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. So basically, when we're rolling the code out for an app, it's basically just going through each page of the design file and matching the code up to that and getting it all in alignment, right?
Yeah, honestly, that's all it is. I wish it felt that simple as just saying it. But yeah, typically the steps we'll go from high fidelity user journey to design to development. So we just take those design files and we put them in and we match it as best as we can. And then of course we send it to our designer so he can say, we were 3 pixels off on the right and our font was 2 below. And of course we'll go in and fix that, iterate there. And then we present it to you guys and hopefully check off that milestone.
And then walk me through so this is something that pops up a lot where people say, hey, I just want to build a feature. It's exactly like this feature in Uber. Just go in and copy the code from there, right? And that's something we hear a lot. I know it sounds funny, but I think that's, people are typically kind of in that mindset of, I don't get it. There's already code over there. Why can't we just copy and paste it? So for example, if I wanted to launch a similar mindfulness app, why can't I just go in and copy and paste code from one app to another app?
That's a really, really good question. And I actually get asked this all the time. And I usually always respond with, for whatever reason, when I copy and paste something, it takes me twice as long to get it working as it would to code it from scratch. And the reason why is things aren't built the same. So for example, I'm guessing there is a, let's see. So when we think of copying and pasting code, it's exactly that. So if I were to take this whole file and copy it and make a new app, I'm going to call this dummy app here, or copy and paste hell. When I actually copy and paste this in, it won't even build. It just yells at me. It's just like, oh, we don't have this, and then I've got to go over, take this file wherever it lives and copy it and paste it into my program, and then take this file and copy and paste it into my program. And by the time I have done all that and figured out why my code doesn't compile, I could have just rewritten the whole thing. So copying and pasting isn't quite as simple as people think it is.
It's not. Copy and paste isn't just copy and paste when it comes to building an app.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're building something, and I mean this depends too. So a lot of people have this concept. I mean, if you have a 10 of 15, your code base probably isn't like this. Things are probably separated enough where you could take out a whole module and put it into another project that would work. But unless you've got a 10-person team and the architect needs to be that flexible, you're not going to be able to just copy and paste it in. So.
Yeah. Now, okay, here's another side of the question though, because a lot of these features that, I can imagine the very first time that somebody built the code that would let you see where your car is at, like on Uber when you request a ride and you can see where that's at. Now, what's the difference between, say, I know you can't copy and paste that, but there are certain things that exist that will speed up an app quite a bit, right? So if there's
Yeah.
features that I have where I say, hey, I want it to be very similar to this from Uber. I want it to be very similar to this from DoorDash. I want this from Yelp.
Yeah.
There is a lot of time that could be saved with ideas
Yeah.
like that, right?
So you're never, so this is a really good point. I was actually talking to my business partner about this as he was out talking with another client. Um, the thing that happens is um, copying and pasting doesn't work. It takes twice as long. Um, you don't necessarily want to work with someone. You're not working with someone because they've built it before, because they can just take that code and copy and paste it. You're working with them because they have the experience and have built something like that before and have gone through that initial thought process once, and they can go through it again and build it to match your idea. And so I think the best analogy here, and this is what we'll have to do too, Shane, is you take one picture, um, and this guy like goes and draws it, and it takes him like 30 minutes, and it's immaculate, it's beautiful. But then you take his first picture that's horrible, took him 4 hours. It took him 20 years to take that same picture and draw it in 30 minutes. And so it's just practice, practice, practice. So what you're paying for is the experience of the developer. You're not paying for the code that they've already written. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's like if somebody, we've actually seen that with a lot of developers that kind of talk a big game and then they end up not being that valuable, right? Is they'll say, oh, I have all these other apps where I could just copy and paste that over. And we've never really seen that work out, right? So it's more like you want a developer that says, yeah, I've solved this and this problem. I built this feature. I've connected with these platforms before. I know I'll be able to do it again. So they have we have a high level of confidence in their ability to actually get it done, right?
Yeah. Because it's always different too. It's like you want somebody who's like a good critical thinker. And if they like built it, so for example, if they've built a delivery service before, you are definitely, whatever their rate is, it's well worth it because they can take that same information and apply it versus somebody who says, hey, yeah, I built it before and can copy and paste it in. They're not looking at it from the perspective of your app is completely different and it's going to have completely different things in it. And it's probably going to take them just as long to like merge that over versus somebody who's like, yeah, I've done it before, shouldn't be too crazy. I've got an idea of how to build it.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay, so now we've talked through the feature list. We have our tech recommendations. We built our flowcharts. We have our wireframes built. We've got our clickable prototype. We played around with that. We've built months and months of code, right? So what's the process? First of all, what's the timeline? And I know it could take, up to, you mentioned it could take up to 2 years to, launch a feature or something like that. But what's kind of a typical target that we like to bite off as far as how long are we sitting down once the designs are done and we're actually just writing code? How many weeks or months is that typically?
So to build a specific feature or two, it can take, depending on the size of the feature, to build a feature, it'll take somewhere between probably 1 and 3 weeks. To build a complete product that the consumer can use would probably take somewhere between 2 months and 6 months is on average, depending on the amount of developers working on it and how big the application is. So
cool. So you could actually, it's realistic to come in and have from taking, from an idea on the back of a napkin to something that you can test in your hand with real code. It's possible to be there in under 6 months, maybe, depending on the size of the app.
So to actually have something testable, you could have something out in half that time. So basically, yeah. So the way that it's going to work is we take all of these milestones and features and we break them out and we build each of them, throughout the weeks or whatever. But at the same time, what we like to do is once we finish that feature, we actually give you access to it via TestFly or Firebase distribution if you're having an Android user. That way you can test the app, and if there are any bugs, you can let us know and fill out reports and stuff. Now, I'm talking in 6 months, you could be on the App Store in the hands of the consumers, and within 3 and 6 months. So yeah, you can develop super fast. A lot of people, for whatever reason, just kind of like to string it out over 2 or 3 years, and then it's a wasted idea. So if you're like really committed to like building something, build it in less than a year, build it in less than 6 months.
Get it out fast and see
Get
and
out.
start to iterate on it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So then what's the
Thank you.
process? What does the process look like after we're done with coding or as we're getting close to being done? You know, because I know we go through a pretty rigorous QA process and testing process. What does that look like typically and what's involved in that?
Yeah, so QA is it's a whole different beast. So QA, you literally just give it to somebody, and their whole goal is to break your application. It's super funny. My girlfriend actually does a lot of QA testing for us, and for whatever reason, she's just super good at breaking things. She's like, and it's super good with design too. I'm like, hey, I gave that example in the clickable prototype. Go find your profile and go change your name. And she's like, clicks. It's like just clicks on everything. I don't know. She's like very impatient, and so she's like the perfect user for all of our stuff. So
So she's kind of simulating what like an average user would be
yeah,
like
exactly.
somebody
So
that
somebody who
downloads
has
the app and tries to figure out, yeah.
yeah, so somebody who has zero idea what the product is, hopefully it's ideal they have the same pain points that you're trying to solve that way. There's still like that emotion involved in it. Um, but yeah, basically what they do is they go in and they use the application. They'll try and break it. A lot of things that QAers test for in terms of app development would probably be error alerts, screen sizes, core functionalities working and in what you expect it to be. Big thing is testing like APIs and output, making sure what you put in to your equation is correctly calculating what should come out of that equation. Different things like that. They'll even put like simulators or different things on their phone to kind of make their internet super choppy and spotty in and out. Um, just really anything that would put the application in a bad state. So just
So you want
watch
to
it.
you want to simulate every condition
It
that
could
would make
possibly
it possibly
happen.
crash. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
So you're
exactly.
solving that before it gets out to your users.
Yep,
Very
exactly.
cool.
And that's really the last part of release. Um, I mean, you should spend a lot of time testing, a lot of time planning, but I think the most important thing is get it out to the users quickly. I don't remember the book, but basically what it said is if you're getting the product out to your users and you like it, you're releasing too late. So,
Yeah, you're taking way too long.
yep.
And then what's the process of actually submitting it to the App Store? I have a few questions around this because we get asked about this a lot. But once you're done, once you're testing, how do you actually make it live? And what does that process look like? And then I want to ask you a follow-up question to that as well.
Yeah, it's actually super, super easy. So one, it doesn't matter how amazing of a developer you are and how familiar you are with what you're building or everything around App Store reviews. You will probably get denied the first time, just because Apple just I don't know they just like to make you work for it. So if you don't get at least one rejection, I don't know that I would call your app an app. No. Um, but it's super simple. Basically, what you do is you go in, you fill out a bunch of information. What's the app name? A bunch of SEO stuff. Put some photos on there, and you click submit. Um, an app review nowadays takes anywhere between 12 and a really long one, 48 hours to get approved. Once it's approved and you click release, it takes anywhere between 12 and 48 hours to populate on the App Store for people to be able to search for it and find it, and you to have a link that you can share.
Wow. Okay. So that's actually a lot faster than even I thought. I thought it was maybe a month-long process to get your app.
It honestly depends on the application and how familiar you are with the App Store guidelines. If you're familiar with it, you can cross those bridges early. For example, like one thing that I know nobody would really think about unless they read the documentation is if you're connecting to a third party like Bluetooth service, I don't know, automatically you need to send Apple you need to apply for some code and give it to Apple so they can verify you're on like this list that allows you to connect to this Bluetooth device. Um, if you have a subscription, um, I would assume everybody knows this. if you have a subscription that unlocks a feature, you have to use Apple's in-app purchases so Apple can get their cut. If you are a offering just a service, so somebody comes to your house and fixes something for you, you can't use Apple's in-app purchases stuff. This one's super weird and finicky. You cannot make the font of your overall monthly price smaller than when you break it out into a weekly price. A lot of apps try and do that in the design. So they'll be like, yeah, it's uh, $20 a month. And they'll make that super small, but they'll be like, it's $5 a week. Apple has gotten rid of that.
Yeah.
So
So they have basically their set of guidelines that they want to make sure that it's a good user for their or a
yeah,
good experience for their users. And so if you do anything that violates that, they're going to typically shut you down.
yeah, a
Or
big
not.
one is Apple's looking for consistency, right? So if you're, let's say you're very big on Android, if you try to take Android's navigation and the way Android apps work and put it on the App Store, Apple's going to reject it because they expect all apps to follow a similar or recognized interface. So like you don't see very many apps with like a hamburger menu in the top left. You see a bottom tab bar. So Apple expects if you're going to have a navigation, you should probably have a bottom tab bar. So anyway.
Okay, so the last question I have about getting your app rejected or approved and going live on the App Store is what are the chances of building an app? Let's say that a founder comes in and they spend, a ton of money and they spend, 9 months building out the set of ideas. What's the chances that their app gets rejected and will never make it to the App Store versus the chances that their app will be accepted and be something that are sold? Is it like a pretty big gamble? Like, is it 50-50 that your idea is going to be accepted and you're going to spend all this money and you might have Apple tell you, oh, you can't be on our app store? Or is it way less than that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's why it's just super important that you're working with somebody who knows what they're doing. I mean, if you're working with someone who doesn't know how to build in-app purchases or understands Apple's design guidelines that are there and have requirements, and is just not familiar with iOS development in general, there's a very high chance that your app will get rejected either for design reasons, functionality reasons. If your app crashes at all during testing, they don't let it through. If you're building an app with Apple's guidelines in mind, you have a pretty good chance of getting accepted.
Well, thanks for taking us through that. I think that's exciting to kind of see the build from idea into finished app that gets accepted onto the App Store. And if people want to work with us, want to work with Strides, what are the next steps they should take, and how does that process work?
Yeah, the easiest way to get in touch with us is to go through our free strategy call. And the way you can do that is you can navigate over to strides.dev, click start a project, and fill out this info here. And fill out our simple questionnaire. Once you go through that questionnaire, we'll get a hold of you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. We're excited to take you through this process. And like Austin said, if you want to register and give us a little bit of info and schedule your free strategy call, we'd love to talk through your idea more specifically. And until then, have a great one and we'll see you then.